Well, thank you everyone so much for being part of this first recording of the All Else's Commentary podcast live. So it's wonderful to be able to welcome all of you into this and to welcome four incredible, very special guests to the podcast. I'll introduce them now. I'll probably also introduce them separately on the podcast itself. But thank you first of all to Rabbi Charley Baginsky, who's the co-lead for the Movement for Progressive Judaism, holding public leadership. So that means voice, external affairs and fundraising and that kind of thing. And she'll speak a bit more about that when we come to that, some of our questions in a second. Rabbi Josh Levy, my former boss, and still the emeritus rabbi at Elliott. This is his second time on the podcast. He is the other co-lead for the Movement for Progressive Judaism, holding organizational effectiveness, integration of the movement, oversight of the core work of the movement, including how we support our communities. Rabbi Mühlstein, who has been one of my teachers since she was a student rabbi at Finchley Progressive Synagogue where I grew up, and now she is senior rabbi of the Ark Synagogue in Northwood, as well as chair for the European Union for Progressive Judaism. And finally, last but not least at all, Lesley Sachs, who's the chair of the IMPJ, the Israeli Movement for Progressive Judaism. She's served in many other important roles in the worldwide progressive movement, and for 10 years she was the executive director of Women of the Wall. Please do give a round of applause for all four of them. So one of the things that Rabbis Josh and Charley said yesterday as we all came together for Kabbalat Shabbat was that Hinenu, the name of this conference, is an answer to a divine call. So I really want to honor that idea by asking us, first of all, to reflect on what is that call? What are the things that we feel as progressive Jews we're being called to bring into our current and future realities? And what are the challenges that we see, either here with us or out there on the horizon coming up to greet us? And how are we going to get through that challenge, those challenges that we're facing? What are the texts and what are the ideas that are going to help us to navigate our progressive Jewish future? But I'm actually going to start with the positives. I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists, asking each of you, with all the challenges, with all the problems we might be talking about at the moment, what is it that's bringing you Jewish joy? And since you're right on my left, Rabbi Josh, maybe you can begin by telling us what's bringing you Jewish joy at the moment.
Thank you. So one of the aspects of my work, the work that Charley and I do is, as I think for all of us, is that we get to travel around visiting various communities, congregations in different places. Certainly it's one of the things that was really exciting for me when I moved from being a rabbi in one place to being in this role, was the ability to travel and see. And actually it's the diversity of those communities that gives me a huge amount of joy. Really that ability to go into a community and see people in their place, in their context, creating meaningful Jewish life together. And I think one of the things that's very special about Progressive Judaism is that each of our communities is its own independent, autonomous entity with its own identity, its own shape and ideas and values, and we have a huge amount that we share, but each one of them is very, very special. And so it's a real joy for us. We get to go into communities and see all of that beauty that there is around the country.
Thank you. What about Charley?
I've discovered that I am an optimist over the last 3 years. Despite the state of the world, I've discovered that I'm really optimistic about the possibility of change. We sit here 2-3 years after two separate conferences, having in the last 2 to 3 years brought together two movements that for X number of years, depending on how you count, didn't seem possible. And that idea that we can make impact on the world, that actually we can do things differently, makes me hugely optimistic and gives me, seems to give me endless energy and joy.
Lesley.
At the risk of being a bit corny, it's being here. In the wider sense of meeting and connecting and realizing that we have the same values, the same outlook, and we speak the same language here, and when I travel in Canada, and when I travel in Australia, that gives so much joy and strength. that knowing, that connection, speaking to people, realizing that they care and what's happening, and they know what's happening in Israel, and some of them know what's happening with the movement, and if they don't, they want to know. That gives me so much joy.
So for me, I think it's something very, very grounded in many ways, but also very much not grounded. And that is that young women in our community want to do work experience with the rabbis so that they see what it's really like to be a rabbi. And I was reflecting on when I got the first request, and she's a young woman, just had her bat mitzvah, so really on the young part of the woman, and said, I really want to know what it's like every day. So I want to come on a Thursday, not on a Shabbos. And I think it gives me great joy that our young people are really interested in understanding what is this experiment of Jewish communal life really about. That it's not just about Shabbat and the festivals or the youth movement, but it's about seeing what do we really do holistically. So that gives me great joy, and I think I would have been happy if it had been a young man in the congregation too, but I think it gives me extra joy that it's a young woman who's coming to do her work experience with me.
Well, thank you all for sharing. And my own personal reflection, I thought I should also probably answer the question as well, actually follows on very nicely from Rabbi Elliott, which is having spent just last week 2 hours with a group of people between the age of about 20 and 26 in our congregation who literally just wanted to come and sit for an hour and study Talmud. And there was no other agenda really. Well, they had beer. We used to give them beer as well. Or cider for those of them being free. And that was free for them. But just to see them getting excited about Talmud. And one of the reasons that I started this podcast was because it felt like quite a lot of the time our thinking about Torah and our thinking about Judaism was kind of going from week to week, following the headlines, trying to think about how we were going to respond to what was happening in the world. And that's obviously incredibly important and a vital part of the work we do as rabbis and communal leaders and cantors and communal leaders. But just being able to sit and talk about a story from the Talmud and not to necessarily worry so much about what was happening in the outside world was also bringing me great joy as well. As I said, we are going to look at the challenge. We are going to think about the things that are going to be challenges for our movement. And I wonder if we could actually start. We've just heard at the conference from Rabbi MK Gilad Kariv about many of the challenges that are facing us in Israel. So Lesley, I might turn to you first. Talk a bit about the challenges. What do you see as the challenges? What are the challenges that are being faced by the IMPJ, by you kind of seeing personally in Israel, specifically to Progressive Judaism? But maybe there are also things you might want to comment on from the wider world as well.
So one of the things that people who heard my previous presentations heard from me is it's really important for us to speak in a Jewish progressive voice, because all the things that we are opposing, and Gilad mentioned so many of them, most of them come from really a fundamentalist Jewish outlook, and we can answer it and say, no, we think differently, but we're also speaking in a Jewish voice, because again, there's so many secular Israelis who are made to feel in many ways that their outlook and what they're bringing is what we call the half-empty cart, meaning that they are not bringing with them the history, the Jewish history. And when we talk about, in the name of Judaism, we will defend democracy, that is speaking in a different kind of voice, a voice that needs to be heard. When we open a racism crisis center and we get people responding, and we say, okay, we're going to represent you in court. That is our Jewish values that are driving us, and it's not only our values; it's all of our values. And I think that's really important. That gives us a different voice. I think that the secular, there are many organizations for social change in Israel, but we are bringing something different, something extra, something that needs to be heard. And Israelis need to understand that, we don't throw away the water with the baby with the water. Judaism can be something else. And I think that's really important. That's something that we're bringing. The challenges are huge. I'll mention one that is very recent, and I think a lot don't know about it, and that is that there are organizations that are trying to delegitimize and harm our synagogues. Our synagogues are all built on public land that we get from the municipality. There's a contract. They've been asking for the contracts and the agreements from the municipalities, and then they make sure that we don't do anything that is not permitted according to the contract. Like, for instance, if a congregation is holding a judo class, again, to help them survive financially, that is not permitted. So they are checking us, and they are demanding, it's already happened in Jerusalem, from the Jerusalem municipality to take away the permit for several of our synagogues. One of our synagogues in Jerusalem was hiring out a room to another organization that was dealing with issues of Palestinians in the West Bank. So again, they're going to have to ask them to leave. And this is a real threat to our actual synagogues. And it's just one example. I don't want to take all the time. There's so many, but we're standing strong, and we have a lot of successes, but it's against the tide, all the time.
And just kind of speaking for those who live outside of Israel, and again, thinking back to just an hour ago with Rabbi Gilad, what is it that you want us to hear from you in Israel, in the diaspora? What is it that you feel we need to hear and to know so that we can start that dialogue?
So I want to give firstly, it's okay to criticize the actions of the government. And I can't say it often enough. And if I can tell a short story, I was in Canada on a speaking tour, and I flew in, I won't say where, picked up by a woman. She was telling me that their congregation, she said, not that many people might come because our congregation split, because part of the congregation wanted to put out a position paper about the a relief for the Palestinians during, the humanitarian crisis, and the other half didn't. And I said, we put out a position paper. We did it. She said, I wish we had known. It would have solved the issue. And I think that story basically says, we're there to speak out, to be brave. As Gilad said, we have to be brave. And we also are very, very interested in not only a dialogue, but we have to work together. And that's why I said it gives me so much joy to meet, to travel, to meet, because we really have the same concerns, and we can help each other. We need to discuss it. I was talking earlier with you about how do we work together to address the concerns of the younger generation. What can we do? What can we do as a movement in Israel? We had a survey in 2024. 82% of all the people were either very concerned, very interested. It was very important to them, or they are about the connection with the Jews in the diaspora. Most Israelis care. The government, maybe not so much, but Israelis do care, and certainly the IMPJ does.
So it's interesting to think about how we balance that, how that is combined with what Rabbi Josh also talked about, which is this idea of all our community being so different and having so much variety within them. And as we're sitting here, I can see at the back there are piles of the book that was recently published from our movement, from many, many different diverse voices, specifically about Zionism, about Israel. Rabbi Josh, Rabbi Charley, I don't know if you want to say a few words about how that is a challenge, that kind of challenge of maintaining diversity of voice while also, the kind of the phrase that was leaping to my mind as Lesley was speaking was liberal Jews of the world or progressive Jews of the world unite. And how do we get that right from a perspective of both diversity but also unity?
I think it's a huge challenge. I think we often talk about multivocality as a movement, that our movement is filled with these many voices, and then ask, how do you say something? How can you make a statement about something if one of your values is to be is to embrace a multivocality? And it's a real challenge. It's much easier, talk about UK context, to be the chief rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations because you have a title, you have a look, which is very easy to capture on a newspaper. You know exactly what it's doing. It's much harder to meet the diversity of our community and show that both visually as well as in a voice. And I think for us, the way we visualize it is a little bit like the amazing musical tradition we've heard over this weekend, which, if we look at our liturgy this morning, what it did was it lifted up the difference. It didn't try and squash it. It named it. And it was kind of amazing to sit next to somebody and it would be the same, and then you'd hear a difference either in tune or in words. And we didn't, as a conference, make a decision to say, we're going to come up with a liturgy that has the same ending all the time. Instead, it said, actually, it's really important that we see ourselves in the liturgy. And when we produced, when we edited this book, we weren't trying to say, this is the statement that the movement for Progressive Judaism wants to make about its approach to Zionism, to Israel. What it wants to do is to say, actually, here is a book where you can find yourself in it. And even when you can't find exactly the essay that speaks to you, we're going to write another chapter. And it gives that permission. And I think that that's what Progressive Judaism is trying to, and it's hard, like you talked about challenges. We're in a world that wants to see clear messaging. It wants to see, this is a Jew. This is not a Jew. This is, this is the right, this is the left. And we're interjecting into that multivocality and nuance. But we're going to keep doing it. And eventually, like today, you hear the choir sing. And I think that is how we're approaching that challenge, is to say, actually, it's our value that we're committed to doing this, and it's engagement in and of itself. It's prayer.
And I want to let the two of you also talk about the challenges specifically that you might be seeing on the horizon or facing at the moment. Rabbi Josh.
So I think it's very easy for us to spend a lot of our time talking about voice and politics, and we're living in an intensely political moment in Israel, around the world, certainly here as well. I think we also need to remember that lots of the challenges that our communities are facing are the challenges of community. They're the challenges of, how do we get people to pay their subscriptions? How do we get people to come to synagogue and stay? How do we make sure that we are warm and welcoming? Often, unfortunately, how do we make sure that we're paying for the repair of the roof? And those sorts of challenges. How do we respond to demographic change? So all of those issues, those challenges that have always been with communal life. And I think one of the real challenges for us is, how do we make sure that we fulfill both of the purposes of movement? So when we were traveling the country, we talked a lot about how there were two core purposes of movement. One is to impact on the world, to speak out into the world, to be in relationship with our neighbours, with other progressive Jews around the world. But the other core purpose is, how do we enable progressive Judaism to flourish? And I think it's really important for us that we have both of those parts in the work that we do. And part of that flourishing is also that diversity. So I think one of the things that we really hope, and we're beginning to see, is that because of the coming together of our two movements, because of this work of combination, we enable different kinds of partnerships between communities, different partnerships between colleagues and friends, who are able then to try new things, to do different things, and to enable some of that flourishing of intellectual life. We are proud of that book, not only because it is, I think, really a profoundly important statement about how do we approach issues of progressive Zionism in Israel, but because what it says is we are still going to be a place that has diversity of voice and intellectual, religious, spiritual flourishing. So the next book won't be about Israel. The next book will be about something different in our Jewish tradition and our religious life. But it will be about this thing, which is how do we help progressive Judaism to flourish? And of course, that's part of the challenge in Europe. That's part of the challenge in Israel as well. How do we make sure that this thing that we hold so dear is well resourced and supported and can flourish in the way we need it to?
Rabbi Leah, let's bring in a European perspective. So obviously you are a rabbi working in the UK, but you also hold this hat or this kippah, which is as being the chair for the European Union for Progressive Judaism. What are the challenges? Are there any unique challenges there that we're not facing here, or how does the challenge there relate to here as well?
So I think if we zoom out, there's, I think, an overarching theme which I think really forms the basis of the challenge that we are seeing all across Europe, actually across the world. And I think that's the crisis of liberal democracy. If we look at the history of the progressive Jewish movement, we flourish in liberal democracies. We struggle when in illiberal societies, whether that was under communism or in fascist regimes. If you look at the history of progressive Judaism in Europe, right, we all faced the break of the Shoah, but in communist Europe or communist-ruled Europe, progressive Judaism didn't come back for many, many, many more decades. Or likewise, we forget easily that fascism didn't stop with the Nazis and continued in Italy and Spain and Portugal for much longer. And there too, we see that our communities are only really just starting. The communities in Italy just celebrated 25 years of progressive Judaism in Italy, right? That is an amazing achievement, but it is just 25 years, which means that we see that the communities are still struggling, are still evolving. And I think it is a reality we have to face today of what will the future mean. I mean, I'm always horrified when you look at surveys, and these are surveys also done in the UK, that the younger generation actually quite likes dictatorships. They like a strong ruler who makes decisions without democratic consensus. We can say from history that's not going to be good for progressive Jews. On the other hand, I think, and this is maybe fudging the question, I think a lot of the time the challenges also turn into opportunities for us. Because I think as the world feels more and more hostile, people kind of retreat a little bit from the world, and they are trying to find places where they can find like-minded people. So I think one of the things that we've seen across Europe, and probably the same in Israel and across the world, is that actually people have sought community, especially when it felt like things were closing in on us, when it felt like antisemitism was going to push us. And of course, the collapse of liberal democracies also result in antisemitism. That is, in fact, the breeding ground of antisemitism. So it's not what Israel does or doesn't do, although that does play into it. So I think it is both an opportunity, but it is also a risk. And I think it gives us an important task. I think it means we have to be much more serious as progressive Jews in making sure that at least in the circles that we can affect in educating our children, that we educate people about the values of liberal democracy. And that also speaks to this, what you're talking about, diversity, right? The ability to be able to still be in community with those who don't always agree. That, like, it's a bit of a give and take, right? You live in a democracy. That means sometimes the ruler says things that you don't quite like, but you know what? Hopefully, if you work hard, your group will be in amongst the winners again, and then the people leading from the front will be sharing your values. Sometimes we feel that ebb and flow is a bit too slow, but I think it was Heschel who said that the arc of truth always bends upwards. So we can only hope that if our message is the true message, which I truly hope it is, that you know, even when it feels a little bit challenging, that we mustn't give up, that we have to lean into that we have to be the ones who nurture hope, who say you don't have to be afraid of the other. Yes, it is a challenging time we live in, but hopefully we can do our part to get ourselves out of that.
I think one of the things that I think you're hearing from all of us is actually progressive Judaism and progressive religion generally matters in the world. It makes a difference to the society that we build, and it makes a difference to people's lives. And I think, you know, so often we forget that that's why all of us do this work. It's not, you know, it's not the most lucrative work that we do. It's because we genuinely believe that what we do matters. And progressive Judaism has a unique voice and a unique place, and is able to create unique spaces. And like we often talk about the importance of progressive religion, how often our voice is the voice of a different kind of religious approach, wherever we might be. And that's what you're speaking about, and it's what you're speaking about as well. And actually, that really matters. What we do really matters in the world.
Can I bring another aspect of this kind of challenge that we are absolutely facing is there are a lot of people who hold our values, and they're Jewish, in my case Israeli, and they're not synagogue goers. They're not praying people. They don't. And we're trying to develop, and it's true also about the younger generation. That's why I'm bringing it up here, because I think it's very relevant. We're working on developing new doors, new ways of joining us. In our case, it's through our advocacy and political action. And we started something which we call the Reformist Network. It sounds very good in Hebrew, Reshet HaReformistit. And we invite people who are very excited about our legal work and our work in the Knesset and our work for democracy in the streets and so on. But they won't come and join a shul. But we want them to be part of the movement. And I think with the younger generation, in many ways, it's very similar. We have to find how to bring them in and make them part of. And they might not they might not want to spend their Shabbat
services,
even with wonderful cantors. So I think that's a challenge that we're all facing.
So we've been talking about anti-Semitism and talking about open doors, and I think that's also something which is a huge challenge, which is, you know, this is the first conference I've been to where the leaders of the conference have said to us, don't share that we're here, which is obviously very, very necessary at the moment. But I think it's also something which, you know, I'm hearing from people in congregation, they don't want to come in. It's not because they don't want to pray, it's because they feel like if they come to services, they make themselves into a target. So I wonder if anyone's able to speak to that challenge and where we go with that. It's obviously very different in Israel, but how do we confront that challenge?
I think that you're right. It's the first time that we've ever had to really think about our security in a conference in the way that we have. And the reality is that the first question that people ask us wherever we're putting on an event is, what's the security? And honestly, that's changed in the last 6 months in ways that I think all of you in the room and listening to the podcast will recognise. And that has huge immediate effect on our communities, whether that's the price of additional security, if that's that the amount of airtime that is taken up thinking about security rotas, if that's the amount of volunteer time that goes into securities. And so, of course, it's having a very quick and very immediate effect on our realities. And government, and that's both on a national level and a local level, want to think about the immediacy and quick changes, but for really, in some ways, for very, very good reasons, because they want to keep us safe, you know, and they don't want to, under their watch, that our community continues to feel unsafe and that things happen. And both us and the country in which we live in has this, for us, the UK, has a responsibility to think about the long term. And the long-term reality is that you can put up as many gates as you want to, and it is not going to keep us safe. and that the real work of social cohesion. I don't think we're ever going to fix anti-Semitism for what it's worth. It's probably not that anti-Semitism has risen, but rather that the kind of permission for anti-Semitism to be in the world has risen. We're never going to unpick all of anti-Semitism back to kind of its roots, but we are going to be able to contribute to the work of social cohesion, and we have to be working with government, for us, with government on a national level, but each of us with our local communities, to keep our doors open, because the reality is if Jews are not in the world is poorer for it. And when we talk about liberal religion, the world is not only poorer for the lack of Jews being in the world, it's also lack of the faith being in the world. We often talk about what would happen if the faith sector, and I don't think it's a sector for what it's worth, it's just faith, if we went on strike, what would happen? Actually, if we stopped being the places of blood banks and supporting refugees and supporting the health sector and all of these things, what would happen to society? So we don't have any choice but to make sure that our doors stay open and that we continue to think about the long term. Now that's everything from ensuring that our textbooks are full of thriving Jewish life, that our communities continue to flourish, that we keep finding ways to reach out to our neighbours. All of that has to continue.
Maybe I can come in from a European angle. I think one of the big challenges that progressive Jewish community, or just Jewish communities across Europe face, is that they are just such a tiny minority. That even if they want to keep their door open as much as they can and contribute as much as they can to social cohesion, for most people, it will be invisible, right? I grew up in Germany. I was born in Germany. The number of people that I used to meet all the time who would say, wow, you're the first Jewish person that I met. And okay, maybe it wasn't the first Jewish person, but for a lot of people, it might actually have been the first Jewish person, right? In my school, it was me and my two sisters. We were the Jewish kids in the school. That was it. There's as much as we offered to teach everyone about Hanukkah and so on, there was just three of us. So I think that also puts, in a sense, a huge responsibility on the centers of Jewish life, on Israel, on the United States, on the UK, to some degree on France, although the situation with France is much more complicated also because of the very strict division between state and religion, to be a voice that is a public Jewish voice engaged in dialogue, because the reality is often a Belgian politician is more likely to have heard Rabbi Charley Baginsky or Rabbi Josh Levy than they will have heard Rabbi Mark Neger, who is in Belgium, because there's only so many people he can talk to in the 24 hours he has in a given day, and even rabbis haven't perfected the art, even though Aaron tries to prove me wrong, but we haven't yet perfected the art of being two places at once. Rabbi Aaron almost has. So I think that is one of the huge challenges for the small communities, that we're just so few, that anti-Semitism is nothing to do with the Jews in a lot of countries. A lot of countries, the anti-Semites have never met a Jew. And that kind of feels a bit disempowering sometimes, I think. But also at the same time, right, gives that opportunity to people, to the larger communities, to also think about how would that resonate in some of the smaller communities.
I think, clearly in Europe that's a particularly acute challenge, but I think we have to recognise that's also a UK challenge as well. And I think one of the things that is distinctive about our movement is our commitment to being a national movement in which we support Jewish life wherever there are Jews trying to create meaningful Jewish life for themselves. So, when we talk about the diversity of our communities, we have some of the largest communities in the country, in the heart of Jewish London, where the Jewish community is concentrating, where people are moving into. But we also have some of the smallest Jewish communities in the country, a dozen families trying to create Jewish life together in a place where they're the only Jews in their town. And our commitment is that we find a way to support all of that we use our resources to support that Jewish life for exactly that reason. that we have a responsibility to make sure that Jewish life is supported. And of course, the experience of being Jewish, if you are in one of those small towns, if you are the only Jew in that place, is by its nature very, very different as well. And I think it's very easy, particularly for those who are in those larger communities, not to see just how different that experience can be. And that's part of our commitment that we make as global progressive Judaism, is that we support that work of Jews, of progressive Jewish communities, even where there are very few Jews.
Because those small communities are so vital, because often they are the people that are actually going out and
Absolutely.
saying to schools, to
Absolutely
universities, saying we're the Jews in this area,
Absolutely.
come and meet us.
And when we think about challenges, one of the things to recognise is something that's come up a lot in our discussions, is that there's been a reduction in the number of schools taking up those opportunities to go and visit synagogues, to be in those places. And I think we are really acutely aware. So when we're thinking about our work, we want to support that work in our communities, but we're also in those conversations with the Department of Education saying, you've got to find a way to get those back up and running again and encourage people in, because something's going wrong in that. And we, Progressive Judaism, are the people who are doing that work at the coalface of helping people to meet one another, and we have to make that work.
So I asked each of our panelists before today to bring, having brought the challenges, having talked about the things that are challenges and problems for us, also to think about what are the Jewish texts, the Jewish ideas that are going to carry us through our next period of time, whether that's the next year, the next decade, maybe even the next 100 years, although who knows what the world's going to look like in 100 years' time. And I wonder if we could start with Rabbi Leah. What was your kind of text or your idea that you brought to help us to navigate through that future?
So originally I thought I was going to bring a philosopher, because Elliott and I used to have a philosophy reading group, very nerdy. But instead I thought I'll bring a poet, and I wanted to bring, I will read it because you can't paraphrase poetry. So I wanted to bring some words by Adrienne Rich from her work Natural Resources. It's from 1977, so quite some time ago, but it does still feel very relevant. And she writes, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age, perversely and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." And I chose that text because it's so easy in our current day and age to feel hopeless. It's so easy to look and say, there are so many things in this world that I cannot save. But actually, if we're not going to throw our lot in with all those people who are still trying every single day to reconstitute the world, it's all going to be over, right? And I think that's what Jewish tradition teaches us, that we wake up each morning and thank God for creation, because we are able in every day to recreate the world that little bit. So I wanted to bring that. Adrienne Rich is not always the most hopeful poet, but I think this is quite a hopeful piece.
I was actually teaching about her just this morning in my Shabbat blessing for our bar mitzvah, because she also, there's another teaching which is her fourth question that she adds to Rabbi to Hillel's three questions. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? She also asked, and if not with community, or if not with others, then how? How are we going to do that? So thank you very much.
Nice.
Lesley, I don't know if you want to go next.
So, cheating a bit, I wanted to say something about Israeli songs and poetry in general, and how that is very meaningful to us as the IMPJ. Anyone who's seen our Siddur, which was published just a few years ago, in black we have the ordinary, the Siddur itself, and then in blue we have Israeli poetry, words of wisdom, and popular songs. And the fact that our synagogues have a lot of singing, Israeli singing, because it's in Hebrew, nearly every Israeli song is somehow connected either to one of the Chagim or the Shabbat, or there's a word that connects to Parashat HaShavua, and so there's always I want to say secular songs in a way in our services. And also when we were doing the Havdalot in the plaza of the of those who were the hostage square, the Havdalot was singing. Before the Havdalah, it was just songs, and every song is connected. Eli Eli shelo yigamer leolam Chana Senesh, or Rachel songs, or Zelda, or Yehuda Amichai's poetry that has been made into a song. So all this is what is so that is meaningful, both to me personally, of course. I grew up in Israel; it's part of my life. But also, that is what makes our movement very relevant in Israel to Israelis. They come in. They don't only hear the traditional, but suddenly they hear Arik Einstein because it's his Yortzeit. So a song of his is being sung by the song leader or the cantor. I think that is what is very meaningful that I wanted to bring here to the room.
When my kids were very small, there was went for a number of years. There was a website called Jewels of Elul, which would go through during in the month of Elul, and there'd be a different reading each day, and there'd be a theme. And sometimes a text finds you, and I remember trying to prepare for the High Holy Days while like holding my my baby at the time, with two toddlers running around, and like at the same time thinking of all the things that needed to be done and the house being a mess, and finding this this piece that from an educator in the States who wrote about the fact that when she had been small, her father had been a rabbi, and she'd gone to Cheder, and a teacher had told her that the most important words that you should ever know for Jewish occasions was Gam ze yavo, this too shall pass. And she came home and she said to her father, this is ridiculous. And her father said to her, actually, it's the most important, because the couples, when I meet couples on their wedding day, it's the ones who understand it's not the wedding day. Gam ze yavo, this too will pass. It's really what follows afterwards. And she said, here I find myself as a harried mother of two. She was a harried mother of two. I was a harried mother of three. Here I find myself as a harried mother of two. And actually, these words have got me through real moments of illness and sickness, knowing that this too shall, hard times, this too shall pass. But she said, here I find myself sitting on the couch with my child, and knowing that Gam ze yavo, this will pass, this moment of happiness, of joy, of holding it. And so I hold on to it, and I find that so much on my arm, Gam ze yavo, that it takes us. And I think as us as a community, it's also really important to remember that, we hold these moments of real pain, of agony, but actually, Gam ze yavo, please God, these too will pass, but also these amazing moments of joy that sustain us and keep us going, because Gam ze yavo, that too will pass.
Great.
Simon's been incredibly predictable to anyone who knows me, because it's the text that I always come back to. It's a text from Chazal, from the rabbis. It's originally in Tosefta, and then which is contemporaneous with Mishnah, and then also found in Talmud. It's a text that begins with a question, which is, if this rabbi says that something is pure, and this rabbi says something that is impure, this rabbi says something is permitted, this one says it's forbidden, how can we ever learn Torah? And the answer is not, you have to work out which one is right. It's make yourself a heart of many rooms and put into it the words of the one who says it is pure, and the one who says it is impure, the one who says it is permitted, the one who says it is not permitted. And that idea of a heart of many rooms, if I had something written on my arm, it would be heart of many rooms, because that, I think, is a fundamental animating principle of Judaism, and particularly of the Judaism that we want to create. which is the idea that we can hold that difference within us, within our hearts, and within our communities, and within our movements, and within the world as well. We can hold the fact that we hold difference and we might have different views. And one of the things that is profoundly important about our communities, when we get them right, is their ability to be places where people can hold difference and not be the same and hold disagreements. And it's also one of the things, of course, that makes our communities places of pain when we get it wrong, when we can't hold that disagreement well. And that's why those often feel so painful. I think one of the responses to difference is sometimes to, and we speak about it a lot, to try and flatten it, to push it down, to say, actually, there isn't that difference. We're all the same. But actually what gives us the ability to create interesting communities and lives, but also the animating Jewish idea, is that we don't try to pretend we don't pretend that we all agree on everything, but to enable those disagreements to be things that we learn from, that we celebrate. And that's the fundamental dialectic principle of Rabbinic Judaism. It is fundamental to the way that the rabbis understood our human relationships and how we learn, and it has to be fundamental to the communities that we build. And so that's our task, right? Build ourselves a heart of many rooms, one in which we can have that disagreement and hold it well and beautifully. And if we can do that, that's not just a gift to Jewish life and to our communities. Actually, it's a model for the world as well. We are nothing if not ambitious for Progressive Judaism. Like, we genuinely believe that we have something that can model something different to the world. And that thing that we can model is our ability to create spaces which hold disagreement in a world which is really, really bad at that.
We all know that reform and liberal Judaism come together to progressive. It's very important for us. Can you tell us what you think the impact is on British Jewry as a whole, and the Orthodox in particular?
So everybody look at you.
Okay, we will both. I think we might both have a view on this. So before, I think one of the things that's really important to say, we have heard also from American colleagues, also from Gilad just now talking about the importance of this. This is not just important for us. This is important for world progressive Jewry, that we are bringing our voices together and bringing our communities together to create something different and to model something different. And so Charley will speak about maybe about the impact more in terms of UK Jewry, but we cannot underestimate how significant this is, and the model that we can be for world progressive Jewry as well.
The British community is likes establishment, and for a long time it has been very easy particularly for the United Synagogue, to understand us or to articulate progressive Judaism as being anti-establishment and therefore other. And I think the biggest impact on the British Jewish community is we've been de-othered. And actually we are sharp elbowing. I'm not saying it's easy, but sharp elbowing our way into the middle. That doesn't mean that we're the middle in terms of our voices, that we don't have that breadth and that commitment to inclusion, but it means we're no longer standing in a position where we're going to say we're the other Judaism. Actually, we're just Judaism, right? We're here, we're right in the middle, we've got a way to go, but that's obviously impacting because power doesn't naturally cede power. And as I said right at the beginning, we've got a much harder job because it is much harder to see all of us and say, I'm meeting the Jews. But we're beginning to impact on the world that actually they're just going to have to work harder to say we've met the Jews. And what we're finding is from the other parts of Judaism in the UK, the outside of the OCR, the Office of the Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations, we're seeing a real they're seeing that as a gift, because actually it means they're seen too. Because we're not trying to force anybody out from their being seen. We're trying to say, actually, what's amazing is the diversity of Judaism. Yes, we want our voice or our voices to be heard, but we also want the SNP, the Sephardi and the Portuguese, to be heard and to be seen and to be invited. And we want Masorti Judaism to be heard and to be seen and to be represented. And the place that we hear the most from, I have to say, is from parts of the ultra-Orthodox world who pick up the phone and say, we really need your help. We had a phone call after the Golders Green attack from part of the ultra-Orthodox community who said, can you help us speak to the media? Because actually we're not being talked to. And that's definitely not the first time during, from everything from during COVID when we had pastoral calls to say, we really need to be in some of these round tables and we're not there. Can you help us? And we need support and can we talk this through? So that is a kind of bit that's not seen about that broadening of... There's a lot of work to do, but actually I think we sometimes underestimate how much difference we're beginning to make.
I just going to add one thing, which is this is not something that we can do on our own. Actually, one of the things we need from progressive Jews around the country is to be partners in making that happen. So, it's not just that the UK likes establishment, it's that there's a muscle memory in civil service, in media, in places like that, which means a defaulting to a particular vision of the Jewish community. And we can only challenge that so much, because it looks like we're doing it for our egos, apart from anything else. We need people to challenge that. We need, when the newspaper refers to the chief rabbi, for people to write in and say, he's not the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, he's the chief rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of Great Britain and the Commonwealth, and we'd really appreciate it if you'd refer to him as such. And that will change the dynamic, but we need your help with that, we really do.
Yes, I would just like to switch the frame a little bit from thinking about the Jewish community and widen it to a response to anti-Semitism, given what you've said about anti-Semitism. How about us looking very seriously about some social action work, broadening how we're seen in a constructive, practical way? I've heard about what's happening in Israel, seen what's happening in the US, what's stopping us doing something like this in the UK?
Do you want to go to Lesley or to Rabbi Leah?
I mean, I think it was a question about the UK, which I'm happy to kind of answer to, in the sense that I think it is important that we think about, as the UK progressive Jewish community, about do we need a clearer framework for our social justice work and our social action work. I've been involved over the last 15 years. I did, but it must have been about 15 years ago, I did a 3-month internship at the Religious Action Center in the United States. And ever since, I've been involved in various attempts to kind of organize the Jewish community. Can we put something like that together? So I am a deep believer in that. I think where I would challenge your angle on this discussion is I don't really think it's going to make a dent in anti-Semitism. I think it will create a more just world, but the 10% of people that are diehard anti-Semites, that are the ones that, because of whom we need walls and fences, aren't going to be changed by us doing some nice social justice work. Even if we would go into prior mining towns and only work with white, jobless youth, right? Like, which seems to be their biggest social justice cause at the moment. I'm not trying to dismiss that. I think there are some social justice issues also facing white youth, but I don't think it's the answer to anti-Semitism. I really think the answer to anti-Semitism is investment in liberal democracy, in reminding politicians that, and reminding young people and voters in general, that we mustn't give up on the idea of liberal democracy. I don't think that's quite the same as social justice work, even though I hope that we would build a framework for that also in the UK.
Great.
If you did.
I mean, one quick response to say Rabbi David Saperstein is here tomorrow, who was director of the Religious Action Center for 4 decades, and we'll be talking about exactly those questions, how we do this work together. I understand how much anti-Semitism has become a kind of defining question of our time. I also think we need to remind ourselves that the vast majority of people in this country are not anti-Semitic, that the vast majority of these people in this country actually just want to get on with their lives and get on with it. We had a thing this morning, we popped out, we needed to have a quick conversation during tefillah, and we were making a huge amount of noise with the windows
Not
open.
us.
No, the service, like 300 people singing together, and we were making a huge amount of noise. And there must be like 20 people playing golf just there. None of them were looking up. None of them in the slides being interested. They were just getting on with playing golf, right? And actually, that I think it's really important for us. Yes, with all of the security concerns we have. Yes, with the real issue. I'm not downplaying it, but I think we also need to remember and recognise that this is quite a good and safe place for people to be Jews. There are anti-Semites, but it's a minority. And one of the most important things that we often talk about, which is the fact that the anti-Semites are not the people in government, right? Like actually, when we think about some of the places where Jewish communities are most threatened in the world, it's by the nature of the state in their relationship with them. And we are blessed with
whatever we think of the government.
Whatever we think of the government, however long it thinks, we're blessed with a government that is genuinely in connection with the Jewish community in this country, and we get to see that firsthand, which is very special.
Okay. I wanted to. We talked about it. In the States it's the Iraq. In Israel it's Iraq. And here it would be Iraq or something like that. But Iraq. Oh, UK. I thought about England. Iraq. But the thing is that and again, I'm not talking about the anti-Semitism, but in general, the Iraq activity is what really excites the younger people, and it brings in more people. I talked about it before and about the network. And it is absolutely getting involved in certain aspects of battles and whatever. It's something that, again, it's another door. We were talking about doors, so I'm just putting that into the conversation.
We've got time for one more question.
Thank you. Building on the answer to that last question, in the UK, in your view, what is the best way to reach out to the next generation of Jews and engage them, particularly unaffiliated adults, young adults, in the progressive Jewish world?
Great question. Did you just point at me?
Well,
So I've got the answer. I think we should all have a go. Right?
I will have a go as a congregational rabbi. I think young people are really looking for a spiritual home. That might not necessarily be a kind of religiously devout home, but this world is confusing and splintered and seems to lack meaning in so many ways. And I think people are looking for meaning. I mean, I think people of all age are looking for meaning, but I think young people are also yearning for it. And young people, and I think we shouldn't be disheartened if young people aren't running our doors in every week, right? They will engage, like what Elliott said, when something catches them, they might come to a Torah study, or when something happens in their life, right? When tragedy hits them. I can tell you, our young people, when they go to university, normally they don't call their rabbi. They tend to call their rabbi when they have a mental health crisis, when they face bereavement, when they are facing a question of their own ethical integrity, of like, should I go to the encampment, pro-Palestine encampment, and be a Jew there, or should I not, right? And that's when they actually are seeking community, and us being able to say, we are here for all of that, being able to show that, to communicate that more clearly. I think that's sometimes our challenge, like, right? How do you get them to see that we exist? Yeah. But I think actually there is a huge amount that we do that really does actually speak to young people.
You spoke at the beginning about the work experience, and I think you know, to to use a well-worn phrase, you can't be what you can't see. I think you're exactly. And I think one of the things that we have to do as a movement is to make sure that we're seen and we're known about. And we do have communities spread across the country. But I'll come back to it. You open your textbooks, you are not seeing Jews that look like us. We need to be in more places, seen in more places, so that we can then feed into communities and let them see the rabbis that they can, and our clergy and our communities, so that they want to be in it and know that we're here.
So just that, there is a huge amount of good practice that's happening across the country in different places in exactly this question. There's also quite a lot of data that's been collected and research into exactly how young people encounter community and what they do when they encounter community. I think what was really important about what Leah was talking about is that everything she mentioned was about being there for young people because we're there for them and we care about them. Not being there for young people because we want to get them into our synagogue buildings because it's not a success for us if we don't have them in the building, or because when we look around there are too many old people, or because, right, it can't be about us. The thing that is absolutely fundamental, and we hear this again and again from students, is that what students want is for us to care about them, not for us to care about them so that they come into us, right? If it's about us, it's not going to work. And by the way, that's not just true of students. That's true of everyone who encounters community. If when we are thinking about people in our encounter with community, we are thinking about our numbers or what's our demographic or how do we get people in, we know that doesn't work. Fundamentally, community has to be about those core important things of, are we there for people when they need us? Are we welcoming when they come into our building? There was a survey commissioned about 10 years ago, the Synagogue Vitality Survey. And one of the things it found was that synagogues that have vitality most often are the ones that have good welcome. And I think there are some really good models of that. Like, if you encounter this community, is it nice to you when you walk in the door? Actually, it's going to be really fundamental. I mean, interestingly, there are some communities that are really getting on top of this also in terms of how do you do that welcome on Zoom? How do you do that welcome online? How do you make sure that you have hosts that are looking after people when they're encountering you at distance as well? But those core basics, being there for people when they need you, being welcoming, making prayer that's a little bit less boring, making learning which is interesting and fun, like Elliott was talking about before, actually studying Talmud because it's interesting and exciting and lively, not because we're desperate to get young people into our building. And there is some really good practice out there that we can learn from, but it starts from, it's about meeting people where they are rather than asking them to come into our buildings because we're desperate for more young people to come into our buildings. Right.
Lesley, a last word for us?
We're rooting for you. Your success is our success.
Great. And a huge thank you to our 4 panelists for being so open and conversational with us, and thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Elliott.